How are you doing?
Hi Lisa, how's it going?
Good. Look, thanks this morning for having a chat about Brexit. In terms of your new role as Minister of State for European Affairs. I suppose, firstly, how are you finding the brief and how are you finding the new portfolio?
Well, look, it's obviously a very challenging time in the European sphere of things. Critically, the Brexit issue is looming large. It has been for some time, but we're now obviously at a very critical phase in that, and it's very difficult because I think the one message that we want to get across about Brexit is no matter what happens in terms of trade deals between the European Union and Britain, there are going to be massive changes afoot. I think that message really needs to be driven home, and I'm appealing to everybody really to get to grips with that things will never be the same again after Christmas. We had maybe last year people felt, oh, it's fine once the transition period started, but that transition period is coming to an end, and it is coming to an end. There will be no further extensions, no further transitions. It's just changes and big changes on the way. So Brexit has been dominating the agenda as European Affairs Minister, but there are lots of other issues as well, like the future of Europe, issues such as the rule of law, observing and interacting with colleagues on the COVID situation throughout Europe. I think it's been very useful. It's very difficult at the moment. So there's a lot going on in European affairs at the moment, as there always is.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks, Thomas. I suppose just in terms of the Brexit issue, because it is probably the biggest issue facing the country, from an EU perspective. People will say, well, look, we've had deadlines before. We've been here before at the cliff edge. But why is this time different? Why is this deadline different?
Well, I think because the withdrawal agreement specifies a transition period that's going to end at the end of this year. And fundamentally, Britain has already decided to leave the single market and the customs union. So no matter what trade agreement is agreed between the European Union and Britain is out of the single market. Britain is out of the customs union. And I think that's really the message we want to drive home. So that means that even if a trade deal is agreed in relation to tariffs, you will still have checks between Britain and Ireland on the Irish sea side. And of course, you will have checks between Britain and France. And that's going to create huge difficulties, particularly in terms of trade that goes across on the land bridge, driving across Britain. And that's why a lot of shipping companies are now looking into other options for going across to the European continent. But that's a big change. So that's why we're asking business really to get ready for that. I think it's going to mean, and it's no fault of anyone here or anyone's in Europe, that there's going to be a lot more bureaucracy and paperwork for businesses to export and import. And there's literally nothing we can do with that except encourage businesses to prepare and to take advantage of some of the supports that the government is offering. In relation to North-South, obviously we have a trade, an agreement in terms of trading goods, and that's in the protocol. Now, the implementation of that protocol is still being worked on, but it is legally binding, and I'm confident that the work will be done by the 1st of January. There was a spanner thrown in the works in relation to the internal market bill on that, but I think it is fair to say that a lot of work is ongoing at the moment between Britain and the European Union in relation to Northern Ireland, that I think we can be happy that progress has been made, but it's something that we're constantly keeping an eye on. The joint committee between the EU and Britain will meet again now in November, and the specialised committee in relation to Northern Ireland as well. So we're keeping a constant watch on that to ensure that there are no barriers to trading goods between the Republic of Ireland and Northern Ireland, as has already been agreed between Britain and the European Union.
Yeah, I think that's a really important point that you made about the UK officially exiting the single market and the customs union on the 1st of January, because I think that's one of the challenges for government in terms of communicating, is that people will say, well, Brexit already happened, the withdrawal agreement was agreed to, but nothing has changed, things are fine. Whereas I think there's a job of work to be done to get the message out there that yes, Brexit happened, but because we had a transition period, a year, basically to get used to everything and prepare, that really the 1st of January 2021 is when those key changes, those major changes will take place. And you're right in that we do hope there's a free trade agreement. I think at this point, the feeling is something will get put together, but it may not be very strong initially. But hopefully we can avoid tariffs, but that there will be checks on goods coming into and out of Ireland from the UK. And that will be a change for business. And, it is important that for all of us that are, in our communities and in our localities, that we're assisting businesses to access all of the supports that are there, and to be ready to have their registration with revenue for those that trade with the UK, and that we do our best to support businesses in what will be, a significant change to the way we trade with our nearest neighbour. But I'm glad that you spoke about the North-South cooperation and the need to, I think, look beyond Brexit, because we're coming to the end of Brexit, really. But it is the beginning of the new relationship that we're going to have with the United Kingdom, our closest neighbour, our nearest market. So how do you see us putting in place new mechanisms to maintain that relationship? Because as you'll be aware, Minister, up until now, we've used the European Union and all of those meetings to have that constant interaction with our counterparts in the UK, and we won't have that now. So we will need something else in place to have that interaction. So how do you see that working, Minister, between Ireland and the UK post-Brexit?
Well, literally, people wouldn't know this, but the offices in the European Council building, every country has an office. Ireland and Britain's office are next door to each other. And I have to say, since I took up office and I visited the council building in Brussels, I have to say it is quite tragic to see the British office empty there. And there's now a process ongoing to find a new tenant. Some offices are better than others. That floor is quite good. France is on it as well. They're allocated randomly. So countries are now lobbying to replace the British. But it is quite sad to see that office empty, furniture stacked up. And it really just brings home Brexit, but also that point that you made about that constant interaction. So every time there was a farmers meeting, every time there was a business ministers meeting, every time there was a General Affairs Council meeting, which I attend, every time there was a leaders meeting at the European Council, the British and Irish would be constantly interacting because the offices are next door. And I think that's going to be something that we're going to miss greatly. In addition, I suppose our legal systems are similar and almost uniquely so in the European Union as well in terms of our common law tradition. So that meant that if European legislation was being transposed into British and Irish law, the procedures, the wordings, the way of doing it would be broadly similar. Now we've got to do that on our own without any help or guidance, or in some cases we might copy each other if one had done it before the other to some extent, and then obviously review it for ourselves. That facility is not going to be there, so that's going to create a lot of work for our civil servants, our legal drafters here as well, to get those European protections into Irish law. Another point, though, that's often missed because of the Britain leaving the single market and the customs union, I think Irish people are going to have to look differently at shopping online from British stores. When I say British, I'm talking about the island of Great Britain. I'm not including Northern Ireland, of course. But I have to say that because the protocol is separate, so goods bought on the island of Ireland will be treated separately and completely differently under the protocol. But if you're buying something from a .co.uk in Britain, and there's going to be checks, there's going to be customs, there's going to be issues like that. We don't know what the trade agreement will look like in the end. We don't know what European consumer protection laws will continue to apply in Britain ultimately as well. So I think there's going to be a big change from people shopping on British websites. And I think that's something that we haven't really thought about. We don't really know the full implications of it. But that's not going to be, I suppose, helpful to British-Irish relations, but it's simply going to be a fact of life for Irish and European consumers. And I certainly encourage people maybe to shop local, of course, and we all do that. But the reality is a lot of people shop from British websites. That would certainly have to be reconsidered, I think, after the 1st of January, no matter what happens. But those relations between Britain and Ireland actually are really critical for the Northern Ireland peace process. So I think with the British-Irish Council, the North-South Ministerial Council, they need to really be stepped up a pace. I know the Taoiseach is really keen to do that because the opportunities for interaction with Britain won't be there, and they will be really important because at the end of the day, they're going to be a strong trading partner of ours. They're a key actor in the Northern Ireland peace process and the Northern Ireland situation, no matter what happens, no matter what anyone says. And that's just life. So we're going to have to make sure that we maintain the best possible relations with Britain after this transition period ends. And really that starts as soon as negotiations are concluded. And I've had some interactions with British colleagues, but I think while negotiations are ongoing, we don't want particularly to get involved too much. The European Union team of Michel Barnier represents us, and we have full confidence in them. But once the negotiations are concluded, and hopefully positively, there's a lot of work going to have to be done on this side in terms of bilateral relations with Britain. And I think there's a willingness on the British part of that as well.
Yeah, thank you, Minister. I would agree. I think both countries recognise and acknowledge just how important and special the relationship is between both countries. And there definitely is, I believe, a desire and a willingness and, I think a sense of urgency on the part of both countries to really start that work of putting in place new ways of connecting with each other on a regular basis. So that's a positive. And, I think to be positive about the Brexit process, it is moving along We will come out of it. Things will be okay, and we will get through this. And I think there's been good work going on behind the scenes with our diplomatic services and our civil servants. Minister, maybe just to move on to something, maybe a bit more positive in terms of the European Union and, what other work that you're doing. And I might just ask you briefly about the conference on the future of Europe, and what that is and what it means and how Ireland as a member state will be participating in that.
Well, the Conference on the Future of Europe will be an opportunity, I suppose, Europe-wide for politicians, civic society, citizens to get together at various stages to plan what the future of Europe is going to be. Now, I have to say, I've been somewhat disappointed that progress hasn't really been made in the last few months to the extent that I would like on planning for this. There have been some political issues that maybe got in the way. But I do know at the General Affairs Council this month, which will be held by video conference, of course, we're going to be discussing the Conference on the Future of Europe. And I certainly want this to progress. I think it's really, really important that the engagement that our citizens have with Europe, and we've really seen that in the last couple of years due to Brexit, that continues. What do we want Europe to do? How do we want Europe to develop? What I'd be very keen from our point of view is that we wouldn't get into the constitutional issues that drag us through treaty change, because I think already Europe has enough to do. Europe has enough power. We've set out how European laws are made, and there's a good democratic process for that. And we've had lots of conferences, we might call them, on the future of Europe in Ireland, around the time of the Lisbon Treaty, around the time of the Nice Treaty as well, where we've had public meetings where there's been public engagement. We've had them in the Brexit process too. Haven't been as many now due to the pandemic, but we've a good, strong history in that. And I would like to make sure that we're maximising the European Union to its fullest. Now, I do know that some member states would be very keen to get into constitutional change, treaty change. I would say that the vast majority don't, but I think it's something that we've got to be very, very cautious on, because that does bring out, when you start having referendums on these issues, it starts bringing out the fake news and all of that. We have a good system now that I think is broadly supported. Even on the health side, where there's no real European Union competence, and maybe it would be a good thing if we did have a European Union competence, even on that, I think leaders are working well together after what maybe was a slow start earlier in the year. And there is a lot of work going on COVID coordination. Now the leaders are going to have another meeting shortly as well by video conference on COVID. So I think even on that, there's been good progress, particularly when you look at the work that's been done on vaccines. So I would like to see the Conference on the Future of Europe as an opportunity for every citizen in the European Union to get involved, to show the politicians, show the leaders, and for civic society as well, to let us know where we want Europe to go. We've very good models in this country, and I'm really looking forward to getting involved in the discussions on it. But ultimately, Europe is a democratic structure, and I think that the Conference on the Future of Europe has to be and will be part of that democratic structure.
Yeah, no, I would agree. I mean, I think that the building blocks are there. I don't think we need to add anything new as such. We just need to make what's there work better. And I think, from my own perspective, Minister, I think it's an acknowledgement at the highest levels of the European Union that the EU needs to adapt, to listen to its citizens more, to engage more with its citizens, in particularly younger members of our society, right across every member state. And I think it's a really positive thing that the EU are initiating, that we are now going to, across every member state, engage with our citizens around how they want their European Union to work and what changes they want to see happen. And I think it's an exciting opportunity for Ireland. I think for us as an island nation on the edge of Europe, sometimes because we're not on the mainland Europe, we have to work that little bit harder to show our citizens that we're right there at the top table, involved in decision making, and that it affects Ireland. So I think, Minister, I'm looking forward to working with you on this, actually, that we would see Ireland do a lot of engagement right across the country as part of this Conference on the Future of Europe. And I know, Minister, you're coming into the European Union Affairs Oireachtas Committee in the next number of weeks. I'm a member of that committee, so we're really looking forward to having you with us to discuss the Conference on the Future of Europe, but also, as you mentioned, other key issues in terms of the rule of law and migration and other key items, because we are a member of the European Union, we're not leaving, and there are other issues that are, I suppose, exercising your work as well as Brexit.
Yeah, and I'd be very strongly encouraging, I said this in the Shannon when I was speaking to Shannon last week, encouraging good interaction among our TDs and senators on the rule of law issues. Actually, I think that's really, really important, looking at ourselves, the brief mention we get, which isn't very much in the European Commission report. But discussing the rule of law issues that we're discussing at European level and bringing that back to the people, because some of them do obviously attract interest among the public and controversy. And I think I would definitely welcome an interaction with the European Affairs Committee and with the Dáil and the Shannon on the rule of law issues before I go back to the General Affairs Council to discuss these issues. I think it's really important that we have that. I know that my colleagues on the General Affairs Council are really keen that national parliaments would discuss these issues. They're really, really critical. And the European Union has to be based on fundamental human rights, has to be based on the rule of law, proper procedures. It's the way our country has worked over decades. I think it's the best for people economically, socially, and for keeping everything on the right track. So I definitely look forward to that discussion at the European Affairs Committee and wider discussion in the Dáil and the Shannon as well. These are critical issues. The Brexit negotiations, I think, bring it home because fundamentally they're about jobs and economic prosperity, and our vital national interests in the single market and our fish as well are being discussed. But there are so many other issues at a European Union level that are big issues, big questions that I think we all really need to be getting involved in and get interested in. I certainly welcome feedback from the public and feedback from members of the Dáil and the Shannon.
Brilliant. Well, thank you, Minister. And you'll be glad to know that we're, from the European Union Affairs Oireachtas Committee, we'll be engaging with our MEPs in a number of weeks on that very issue around the rule of law. And we'll be able to then follow up with yourself, Minister, on that very topic. So I would agree, it is certainly one of the key issues that is exercising the European Union, and it's good that Ireland have that dialogue and that conversation. So, Minister, we might leave it there for now. Thank you for the engagement, and I think it's been a really good conversation, and we might look to do this again in a number of months' time and touch back with you again, Minister, to see how your work is going as Minister of State for European Affairs. Thank you, Thomas.
Thanks, Lisa. Bye.
Bye.